On Saturday, February 19, 2011, a bipartisan panel of former top-ranking U.S. officials participated in a conference in Washington, D.C. titled Middle East in Transition: Prospects for Iran. While discussing recent transitions in the region, the speakers reiterated that it is time for the U.S. government to end the 14-year-long terrorist designation on the PMOI and live up to its obligations regarding the residents of Camp Ashraf whose lives are in danger. Speakers at the conference included two former chairmen of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Hugh Shelton and General Peter Pace, and Lee Hamilton, member of the U.S. Homeland Security Advisory Council.
We do not oppose the government in Tehran simply because they defy America, or even because they have become international outlaws in violating the established laws, but because they betray their own people, because they made a lie and a mockery of their own revolution. We all understand the truth. The MEK was placed on a terrorist list as a strategy of appeasement towards Tehran. It failed, and it is time to end it. It isn't simply that it is an injustice. It makes a mockery of the terrorist list itself. This sanction on the MEK is interfering with that right. It is giving comfort to the government in Tehran, and it is placing the United States on the wrong side of history.
By placing the MEK on the FTO list, we have weakened the support of the best organized internal resistance group to the most terrorist-oriented, anti-Western world, anti-democratic regime in the region. That's a disgrace. On top of that, we stood by as the Iraqis invaded Camp Ashraf, as has been talked about several times, as they killed unarmed civilians, Iranian civilians living there, individuals that had been promised protection by the United States. Iran's current regime is clearly a government that needs to change. The MEK is the organization that they fear, and that should tell us something right off the bat. But when you look at what the MEK stands for, when their anti-nuclear stance, from the separation of church and state, from individual rights, MEK is obviously the way that Iran needs to go. But I think the MEK, when you look at them in the big picture, they provide hope for the Iranian people that far exceeds anything that we or our allies can offer.
I know the issue of the MEK is critical to each of you. I tried to understand, when I knew I was going to be part of this panel today, why is it that my government continues to list the MEK as a terrorist organization? I have not found the reason that convinces me. The 10 points that were read today are wonderful. I would support each of those 10 points if I were an Iranian citizen. And I certainly do as a citizen of the world. Some folks said to me this week, well, if the United States government took the MEK off the terrorist list, it would be a signal to the Iranian regime that we had changed from a desire to see changes in regime behavior to a desire to see changes in regime. My response to that is, sounds good to me.
We must insist, of course, that the Iraq government live up to its commitment to protect those who live in Ashraf. I've talked with several of you in recent days about that situation. You have educated me a good bit on what has gone on there. But the safety and security of those people must be assured, and the United States must insist upon it. The next thing we have to do, of course, is to support the opposition in Iran. I have been terribly moved, as you have been, as I have seen the protest movements spreading now across the Middle East. And I am very much aware of the fact that in Iran, in the next 2 or 3 days, it could be a very critical time for the future of that country. The United States must see this as an opportunity to stand up for our core values in this country. And we must support those people in Iran who seek freedom and democracy and respect for human rights. Let me talk about this issue of delisting the MEK. I do not understand why the United States has kept the MEK on the terrorist list for all of these years. I have had access to classified information. This is a factual question with regard to the conduct of the MEK, and why the United States has not resolved it and spoken out on it, I simply do not understand. But I am not aware of any facts that require the MEK to be on the terrorist list. I want to just say a word about this 10-point plan. As I understand it, this is the third option. I've read through that. I like it. I think it's very well done. Support for the ballot box, support for a pluralist system, separation of the church and state, complete gender equality, a modern legal system, support for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, support for private property, support for peaceful coexistence, support for a free Iran.
As I see, there are 3 issues that have to be dealt with. First, the delisting. I mean, it makes no sense to have these delisting. It makes no sense at all. On grounds of evidence, the Court of Appeals, and I understand your lawyer is here who did that masterful brief. The D.C. Court of Appeals has said that the justification for the terrorism designation lacks due process. And so the first step has to be the delisting. And that's where I hope we can all work together and make this happen soon. I saw a huge European Union commitment to this issue. So I'm not saying be patient. I'm saying keep doing what you're doing, but let's do it more strategically. And I think the argument that is made is this is a movement that doesn't want any money. This is a movement that doesn't want weapons. This is a movement that just wants to be allowed to roam, to do your democratic thing. Have you ever heard of a movement that doesn't ask for money? I haven't. You're the first. Camp Ashraf. I mean, that again, that's a human rights issue. That is just a matter of security, of moving the right people to secure this camp. Our people work with the government of Iraq to make it happen with the United Nations. Find a formula that provides a safety and security for many of those that are in your families.
Recall, right after the Obama administration came in, we offered the Iranian government an arrangement by which they could take the LEU from Natanz, give it to a second or third party, change it into medical isotopes and return it to Iran. And by the way, that deal had nothing to do with stopping the centrifuges spinning in Natanz, which used to be the American red line. I mean, we had, just to summarize, we had moved our red line dramatically, had not challenged their right to spin centrifuges, in fact, implicitly accept their right to have uranium enriched at 20%. And do you recall they accepted the offer before they didn't? They were unable to pick up what was, I think, by any objective measure, a powerful concession. They were unable,
because of whatever processes or dynamics inside that government, to say yes, even when it was, I think, in their own interest.
General Petraeus did not turn over responsibility for security to Iraqi forces until he received an assurance that the residents of Ashraf would continue to be protected. But Iran has brought increasing pressure on the Iraqi government within the past several months, and the situation for the residents of Camp Ashraf has grown ever more perilous. Iranian Quds forces, either ignored or actually actively supported by Iraqi forces, have attacked and harassed residents of Ashraf, and as you've heard, they've placed at the gates of the camp some 180 loudspeakers that go 24 hours a day to harass the residents day and night, prevent them from sleeping. This psychological pressure has been ongoing for almost a year. Medical care, as you've heard, continues to be denied to residents of Ashraf. MEK is a moderate Islamic organization committed to establishing a secular, democratic, and nuclear-free Iran. But instead of help and encouragement to MEK, the United States instead lists MEK as a foreign terrorist organization. It continued, regrettably, in the administration in which I served, in the belief that if we delisted MEK, the Iranians would send IEDs and other equipment to insurgents in Iraq, which of course they were doing anyway. There's an opportunity to change that dynamic immediately and dramatically by removing the designation of MEK immediately. This would have three effects. First, it would show the current regime that we mean business and that we're prepared to take all necessary steps to bring pressure on it. Second, it would send a strong signal to the Iranian people that United States policy is genuinely to side with them, with those who are standing up against the regime, which would further fuel dissent against the regime in Iran. And third, it would take the focus of the attention of the regime away from Hezbollah in Lebanon and away from the fluid situation in Egypt and make them focus on their own borders.
The conditions, quote, changed significantly, unquote, at Ashraf and the Middle East. Reasons to clearly justify the revocation. But increased sovereignty of Iraq at the expense of the residents in Camp Ashraf must not occur. An important area of concern is the humanitarian conditions at the camp. They are becoming abhorrent and must be improved. What is even more unacceptable are the restraints placed on the residents at Camp Ashraf for obtaining medical care. For Iraq and the United States, members of Camp Ashraf and the PMOI are the best counterbalance to Iranian terrorist and nuclear aggression.
Sanctions have some hope, but for a variety of reasons, they are at best a long shot. So it follows almost by a logical process of elimination that if, as General Hayden says, and I think he's probably right, this regime is incapable of abandoning its nuclear weapons ambitions voluntarily, something has to change inside Iran for their policies and their practices with respect to nuclear weapons to change. And the best thing for that is a change which is produced by the people of Iran. That means it has to happen from inside Iran. But while the United States can't lead, it must, as I think it was Governor Richardson said, it has to be on the right side and show that it's on the right side. I may have the distinction of being the only person on the dais who's actually been to Camp Ashraf. Quite apart from the nature of the MEK, the United States has made a commitment to the protection of the people who are there. Somehow we have to find a way to ensure that those people are protected and that that commitment is made.